Agnolo di Tura buried his 5 children in Siena in the summer of 1348 with his own hands in the garden where they had played, because there was no one left in his neighborhood to help him. What the plague unlocked in the years that followed would take a century to name, and 600 more years to undo. In the year 1000, the average English agricultural laborer earned roughly 1 penny a day, not because anyone had carefully decided that was the fair price for human labor, but because there was nowhere else for that laborer to go. Feudalism was not a policy anyone had consciously designed. It was a gravity, total, slow, and almost entirely invisible from the inside. It had accumulated over centuries through the layering of small arrangements that each seemed reasonable on their own terms. A lord offering protection, a peasant offering labor, generations of obligation condensing into something that felt, after enough time had passed, like the permanent order of the world. In the Winchester Cathedral manor records, one of the most complete archives of medieval rural life that survives, you can trace the same family surnames across 4 and 5 generations, same strips of land, same dues paid at the same feast days, same disputes recorded in the same careful handwriting year after year. That stability had a name. They called it custom. What it actually was a price ceiling enforced by geography. A serf in 1300 England was not free. He was bound to his lord's land, unable to leave without formal permission, unable to sell his labor to a competing manor, unable to negotiate the price of a single day of his life. The market for labor existed. Every lord understood this without needing to name it as economics. A worker who cannot leave is worth far less than one who can, which is precisely why the exits had to stay closed, and why everyone with power in this system worked quietly and constantly to keep them that way. The church confirmed it. Obedience was virtue. Hierarchy was divine arrangement. The crown required it. Stable tax rolls needed stable people in stable places. Even the peasants reinforced it, mostly because the alternative was the road, and the road meant starvation, violence, and no harvest in autumn when the cold came in. England in 1347 held somewhere near 5 million people, the vast majority working land they would never own, for men they could not legally refuse, under terms their grandparents had accepted before any of them were born. This was the economy, stable, legible, and, to virtually everyone inside it, permanent. Not in the way a law is permanent, but in the way weather is permanent, the kind of permanence no one thinks to argue with. Then, October 1347, the port of Messina, on the northeastern tip of Sicily, 12 Genoese trading ships return from the Black Sea and request permission to dock. The sailors aboard are already dying. Some have been dead for days, and no one has moved the bodies. The harbor master orders all 12 ships back out to open sea immediately. It is already too late. The plague does not wait for administrative decisions. It does not honor the boundaries drawn on property maps or the hierarchies carved into church architecture. It moves at the speed of rats and fleas and people standing close enough together to share a prayer. By early spring of 1348, it has crossed from Sicily into mainland Italy and southern France. By summer, it reaches the English port of Weymouth, carried by wool merchants, whose ledgers, found later in the records, stop mid-calculation. William de Eddington, Bishop of Winchester, one of the most powerful ecclesiastical administrators in England, writes to his diocese in August 1348, warning that a pestilence from the eastern parts is moving west, killing without pattern or preference, and that they should pray without ceasing. Prayer was the only response anyone could reach for, and they reached for it completely. What no one in that letter, not the bishop with his administrative intelligence, not the lords with their manor records, not the crown with its tax apparatus, could yet see. The plague was not coming to destroy the economy. It was coming to show everyone what the economy had always, underneath all its ceremony and custom, actually been. In the winter of 1348,
1348 and through the spring and summer of 1349, the Black Death moves through England with a speed and comprehensiveness that the records can barely keep pace with. Whole villages go silent. The matter court rolls, those obsessively maintained ledgers of feudal administration, recording every labor obligation, every land transfer, every minor legal dispute, simply stop. In some parishes, the handwriting changes mid-entry, mid-word. The scribe died before the sentence was finished, and whoever picked up the pen next had different handwriting.
Between the winter of 1348 and the spring of 1350, England loses nearly half its people. That number becomes abstract very quickly unless you hold it somewhere specific. The village of Cuxham in Oxfordshire loses its entire resident workforce within a single season. You can walk the boundaries of Cuxham in an afternoon, then multiply that by every village in England. The harvest does not wait for grief. Fields left standing rot into winter. The agricultural calendar, every stage of it, from first plowing to final harvest, breaks down without the people who ran it. But something else begins to happen, something quieter than death, and in the long run, more consequential. The laborers who survived, far fewer of them now, in a landscape still marked by the evidence of how many did not, are starting to move. Not in organized migrations, not in revolt, just quietly, deliberately, on their own initiative, walking to the next manor, the next lord who is offering a halfpenny more per day, because he has a harvest to bring in and no one left to bring it. The sealed exits had depended entirely on one underlying condition, a surplus of people large enough that any individual worker's departure made no difference to the lord, and any worker who left found the same terms waiting at the next manor. There was no longer a surplus. There was a deficit. In the Cuxham Manor court rolls, one entry stops mid-obligation in 1349. The same man reappears 3 months later in a neighboring estate's records, working at approximately double his previous wage. His lord files a formal legal complaint. The complaint goes nowhere. The lord needs workers more urgently than he needs legal precedent upheld. What is happening is not a movement. There is no name for it yet, no one organizing it, no leader speaking for it. It is simply supply and demand discovering each other simultaneously across thousands of individual transactions in villages with no contact with one another. The old rules no longer described the reality that existed. Wages begin to rise, first slowly, tentatively, in isolated manners where a desperate lord quietly offers a penny and a half rather than lose the harvest. Then faster, because word of a better price travels as fast as the people carrying it. The lords panic, not loudly, but in the letters and petitions and parliamentary records of 1349, you can feel the specific quality of fear that comes from watching something you believed was fixed begin to move. In June 1349, Edward III issues the Ordinance of Laborers, a royal decree commanding that wages be frozen at their pre-plague levels, that workers accept employment when offered, and that lords pay no more than the customary rate. It does not work, and the crown already knew, or should have known, it would not work. They issued it anyway, because the alternative was admitting something that the entire architecture of the feudal economy required not be admitted, that the system had never been resting on custom or divine arrangement or centuries of mutual consent. It had been resting on the impossibility of exit, and the impossibility of exit was over. The workers now had somewhere to go. The market was communicating this fact loudly and continuously through the only language markets speak, the prices at which transactions were actually occurring. By 1351, Edward III passes the Statute of Laborers, more formal, more aggressive, wages capped at pre-plague levels, workers who quit without cause to be imprisoned, lords who overpay to be fined the exact amount of the overpayment. Enforcement was assigned to local justices of peace. Most of those justices were lords of manors themselves, the same men who, that same week, were offering above-cap wages to get their harvests in before the frost. The law was on the books.
Compliance was creative. Between 1349 and 1400, real wages for English agricultural laborers roughly double. Gregory Clark spent decades reconstructing English wages from 7 centuries of surviving records. He found one window, these 50 years after the plague, that stands alone. The single sharpest sustained rise in real wages in all of pre-industrial English history. The deadliest event in European history produced the largest improvement in medieval workers' living standards that any generation of them had ever seen. No one planned it. No parliament voted for it. No philosopher argued for it. The system had been suppressing a value that was always there. The plague did not create that value, it revealed it.